Welcome to the People Experience Pulse podcast, your gateway to the new frontier of human experiences at work. On the PX Pulse, we're all about elevating experiences, fostering belonging, and building remarkable workplace cultures in a fast evolving world.
All right, we are back after a hiatus on the PX Pulse. I'm here with my partner, Vicki. Vicki, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Doing okay too, right? I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's
exactly.
a turbulent time. I know a lot of people are feeling the weight of it. Everybody who's listening to this is struggling in their leadership and just the complexity of how to address all the changes going on in the world. So it's kind of a heavy time, isn't it?
It is. And I kind of feel like you, our listeners, might be exhausted and we kind of are too. So we feel you and empathize with that.
Yeah. I'm figuratively and literally exhausted. I was up late last night. I was like, you know what? I might cancel this recording this morning because it's early. But I figured, showing up exhausted is probably the right state of being. So let's just roll with it.
Let's roll with it and talk about it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about leading with hope in times of change. Change is inevitable, but how we lead through it determines whether our teams thrive or struggle. And this is incredibly tough right now because there's so much uncertainty. And we want to just talk today about how hope-driven leadership is essential. Right, Vicki?
Hope is one of my favorite words right now. And in fact, I'm sure you know that I am the biggest Rush fan on earth. And one of their great lines in one of their songs called The Garden is, "Hope is what remains to be seen." So I keep playing that in my mind over and over. We need that right now, right?
We do. And there's lots of things you can lean on when it comes to where you arrive at your hope, and everyone has kind of a different way of arriving there. But it is a leadership strategy, not just a feeling. And there's so many pitfalls of reactionary leadership versus proactive, hope-driven leadership that we want to get into today. And the one thing that I came to when I was thinking about this topic is that employees never leave companies, they leave uncertainty. And
so
when
true.
People are left to their own devices of wondering what the future might look like, and the leader's not getting out in front of that, that can really be a tough state of being for a company.
It's so true. And I love what you said about leadership strategy versus just a feeling, because I think when we work with our clients, we can see the difference between, leaders that operate out of hope and those that operate out of fear. Like, can't you just feel that on a visceral level?
Absolutely. And particularly in times, I know over the last few years, there's been a lot of rounds of layoffs, particularly in tech. A lot of employees are wondering what their security looks like in terms of how they're providing for their families and actualizing their value in the marketplace. And with AI disrupting jobs and people really being worried about that on top of the state of politics, it's just a lot. And so people are just uncertain. And as a people leader, a people first leader, acknowledging that reality first is one thing, but then helping not only to find your own hope, because you have to put the oxygen mask on first, but to make sure that you're getting out front and communicating regularly about where your hope comes from and helping people have that same sense of hope going forward in their own ways.
Yeah, I really appreciated that you included the piece about the oxygen mask, because I hear that from a lot of leaders right now. Like, the expectation is for them to, step up and be the inspiration and the hope for their teams, but they themselves are in, I guess, what I would call survival mode. Their brains are tired. And so I think that it's so important for them to cultivate that resilience and acknowledgement of their own feelings within themselves as the first step. What do you think?
I agree. And I was going to ask you about this resilience piece, because I know as an executive coach, you spend a lot of time with leaders who are probably very vulnerably sharing that they don't feel super steady and confident and optimistic in this time, and that it's kind of you feel like a hamster on a wheel right now. It's just not, there's nothing to really point to. So how are you seeing that with leaders right now? How are they, despite that, able to model steady confidence and optimism in this time?
Yeah, it somewhat depends on what industry they're in and kind of how experienced they are. So there's a lot of variety within their reactions, but I would say overall that people not just leaders, but teams, other of my clients they're kind of freaking out because we're not really built as humans to handle this level of uncertainty where you don't even know from one day to the next whether the rules are going to change, in your society. I don't think we're really built that way. And so it's very draining and people are very tired, but they are stepping up. And this is what is so amazing to me is I am just seeing people step up and really be there for their teams and reinforce that sense of stability. I hear leaders saying, no matter what's going on in the outside world, we're not going to do anything differently. We're not going to change some of these core values that we have, and reassuring their teams that whatever goes on in society, this little bubble inside this company is going to stay the same and maybe even get better.
Yeah, fortunately, I mean, a lot of institutions these days really are riddled with mistrust. If you were to look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, I think most institutions that maybe once were trusted entities like your government no longer have that sentiment. But now the workplace is really that safe haven where you ought to be able to communicate openly and transparently. And I do feel like the leader particularly sets that tone when they are communicating frequently, openly, transparently, even if there's a little vulnerability to that and saying a little bit of, I don't know, but don't sugarcoat things, don't fearmonger either. But those small, consistent actions to reinforce stability, that constant communication really makes a difference instead of retreating back and not communicating frequently and transparently and openly.
That is so true. And one thing that you've probably heard me say 1,000 times is that the top leader really sets the tone, like in any structure. So if you have a team, like whoever's sort of leading that team, if you have a company, like whoever is the CEO or COO, these top leaders, they really set the tone and they tend to role model behaviors, whether they're aware of it or not. And so I think it's so important for them to be creating these safer spaces. And I can see that there's going to become a bigger division between companies that do that and companies that don't. And that it's the talent is going to get attracted to the companies.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, people want to know what's going on. So if you're not communicating, then they're left to their own devices and they're going to assume the worst. It's just the natural drift of the brain. And
Exactly.
so that's a
Yes.
great way to cultivate resilience and leadership is through that steady confidence and optimism. Even if you're yourself are not feeling that, you still need to be able to take good care of yourself, put that oxygen mask on first, but that steady communication, transparent way of being is so important. I was going to say too that I think the psychological safety during the uncertainty for the employees to express the concerns and being able to acknowledge kind of the difficulties that they're feeling while the optimism is being inspired. The lack of sugarcoating is one thing because you don't want to always portray this fact that everything is just going to be perfect because nobody is ever going to believe that. But creating a space where people can go to their next level managers, can communicate in a ask me anything session, or go to their employee resource groups and voice collective concern and find a place of empathy, I think is so important right now to provide reassurance without making any false promises.
That is so true because I went to an event the other night that I know I shared with you where I was speaking on a panel about the role of Indian languages in business. And one thing I noticed was that like everybody in the room seemed to have this collective desire to just connect and build cultural bridges. And there were people from lots of different cultures there. But when I spoke about empathy on my part of the panel, I saw so many heads nodding. And then afterwards, so many people came to me and they were like, that just resonated so much. And there's almost like a hunger for that right now because there is a lot of toxicity just in, sort of in the air around us. And I don't know, it almost makes people just crave that. And so if companies and leaders can provide that in a structured way, like you said, don't make it a separate thing. Just let it be built into the things that they already do. Town hall meetings, one-on-ones, whatever. I think people need that more than ever.
Yeah, agreed. And it's amazing when people come together in community like that around a common mission and a common goal or a shared industry like you had in that event. You find that people agree to way more than they disagree with. And at the end of the day, that sense of belonging, that sense of community, that sense of I have people around me that can have compassion for me, even if I'm struggling. And then I feel like I identify within this community that it's safe. It makes such a big difference. We are made for community, and the workplace is where we spend a lion's share of our time for the most part. And it's really important that that environment is cultivated to be a psychologically safe environment. And to your point, it takes the top leader to set that tone.
It's so true. It's so true. And I think that we want things that we are not aware that we want until we see them and get them, because the brain tends to skew negative, like you said earlier, and the news tends to skew negative. And there's a lot of things. That's why negative news is so easy to sell,
Yeah, fear
because the
sells.
brain is kind of, programmed to skew negative in the first place. And it is easy to normalize that and to think that's your norm until you get into an environment that is not that. And you're reminded that, hey, there is a lot more out there than just what's negative and what's being fed to us, I guess.
Yeah. Agreed. And so we want to give you a practical framework and maybe some takeaways that you can apply to this. It's just a challenging time, as we said before. But if there's something that you can go to as your default framework as a leader to continue to be a people first leader and to acknowledge these realities, we'd like to leave you with this. So there's the 3 H's: honesty, humility, and hope. Do you want to get into that, Vicki?
Yeah, sure. So honesty, like Jeff said earlier, just acknowledge those challenges authentically. And I know this is not an easy thing to do, because you might feel like it could be offensive to sway one way or the other when you talk about the challenges, but you need to trust yourself as a leader and just acknowledge things authentically, acknowledge even that there is potentially a conflict within you in talking about it, but just be truthful about what's going on. Don't leave people to start the rumor mill and the gossip mill, which is so easy to do in the office.
Yeah. And then the humility and hope, for the humility, just listen and engage. Don't assume all the answers. And I don't know, I'm not sure. Those are perfectly reasonable responses as a leader. If you're having a one-on-one or if you're spending time in front of a group of people and you're kind of pressured to respond to a certain situation, I know the weight of that. And I know that you feel like you're kind of caught in the crosshairs of the political divisiveness in our world. And so just be humble. You don't always have to take a stance on everything. I know it's hard to take a stance on everything, but to certainly address that with humility and listen to everybody and don't shy away from the conversations makes all the difference to folks.
For sure. And the final H of the 3 H's is hope. So it's so important to reinforce that bigger picture and the path forward, because again, the brain does tend to skew negative, and sometimes we actually need leaders to remind us to go back the other direction just to balance things out. There's a lot of good news out there. I don't know if you listeners read Optimist daily, but it's a great sort of reminder that there's a lot of wonderful scientific advances and medical advances and all kinds of good news that is happening in the world today. And we just sometimes need to be reminded of that.
That's a new resource for me, optimistdaily.com. I have now got that bookmarked. Thank you for that.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. So some practical takeaways, leadership check-in. How often are you reinforcing stability and clarity for your teams? Might be a question worth asking yourself and your leadership team as you plan to continue to communicate honestly and openly with everyone. So a practical step might be develop a 3-minute state of hope check-in in your next team meeting, with your leadership team, or if you have a retreat, those are always a good time to speak openly about that and come together on the actuality of the time that you're in. and really just making sure that you're encouraging. The best leaders make hope tangible through consistent action. And so by making these conversations a priority and by leading in this way, you'll feel encouraged. I have no doubt that you'll continue to find hope through the response that you're getting and the meaningful conversations that you're sparking.
I love that, because leaders and teams are mirrors of each other. So if a leader can give a team hope, it'll come back to them for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So just to recap, leadership's about setting an emotional tone for the organization. It is a strategy, not just a feeling. Think about how you can show up. Are you a leader who brings hope or one who reinforces fear? And so Vicki always says, what's one small thing you can do today to reinforce this lesson? And you always give the example of, I think, Neil Armstrong, right,
Yep.
Vicki?
Walking on the moon, he took one small step and changed the world.
Yeah, I love that. So go forth and be a people first leader today. We hope this was a helpful conversation to you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Thank you for joining us for another insightful episode of the People Experience Pulse. We hope the words shared in this episode have inspired you as much as they've inspired us. Now the real challenge begins, putting what you've learned into practice. The change you create, no matter how small, could be the spark that ignites an exceptional people experience in your organization and beyond. If you found value in today's conversation, we'd greatly appreciate it if you took a moment to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us deliver high-value content and reach more listeners like you. You can find other inspiring episodes and additional resources at our website, thepxpulse.com. Join our community at thepxpulse.com. Thank you again for joining us on the People Experience Pulse. Until next time, remember, the heartbeat of any organization is its people. Let's make every pulse count.